Hello, welcome to Faith for the Journey, episode number 10. Oh my gosh, I'm almost out of breath. You can probably hear that. Welcome to episode number 10. And I normally get started with some music, and it's not going to be any different. We're going to do that. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to video record our session tonight. Did I say session? Gosh, I think I'm still on the couch, guys. Oh my gosh, did I just say session? Episode. Yeah, it's been that kind of week. But you know what? Let's just go ahead and always start with a round of applause that we made it through the week. I like to use that one because it's a nice beginning. Made it, made it, made it. And as I said before, hopefully, let me just go ahead and try to start I just started my camera. So I'm video recording for the first time. And, last week it didn't work out, but I'm trying to do it now. So I'm going to pat myself on the back. Yes. Woohoo! It was a rough week. It seemed like it's just been rough weeks or just week after week after week. So we're going to do that. And thank you for joining Faith for the Journey. I see that people are downloading the podcast, different episodes, and I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I think I watch that too much, but I do notice that people are downloading different ones that they like. It's encouraging, it really is. So let's just get started with music as always, and I'm gonna go to the Faith for the Journey because I have a playlist for this podcast. So I'm gonna go there now, and I don't even know what to play. I'll be honest. Sometimes I'm so torn about which song to play. I found this new one, and I thought it's really appropriate. It's called always searching for new music because music is like one of those resources that you use. Music is very powerful. It has a sound. Everything has a sound. Everything has a sound, and sound has energy. And worship music has a sound and has particular energy behind it. And it lifts the spirit. Lifts the inner man. So I'm going to play the song, stumbled upon the song, Fred Hammond. I haven't played anything by Fred Hammond in a while, and I'm going to play that to start us out. It's called Hold On. Let me see if I can get that going. I know I've been really kind of playing around with new technology, and it's not easy for me. But I'm learning how to do that because I know that, it will be beneficial, and then I'm learning something new. So here we go. I am too close now. I listened to the words of that song. It says never let go. And now the funny thing is, the title tonight to episode number 10 is Loosen Your Grip. You're probably saying, what a contradiction. No, actually not. We'll get further into that as we continue. But the song says never let go. What it's talking about is not letting go of hope. The topic tonight says loosen your grip. It's talking about things. Okay. So, things that, will evaporate at some point that are impermanent. This song is talking about not losing hope. And that's something that, that's an element in our lives that we always need to hold on to. And yeah, there are times when I feel hopeless, like there's certain situations or circumstances. And that's the thing, we're going to talk more about what we put our focus on, and where we put our focus rather, that's what we're going to reap. And it's easier said than done. But here's the thing, we're all seekers on this journey. And as seekers, we're not always going to, find pleasure or joy. In fact, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know that life is filled more times than not with hardships, disappointments, and basically disillusionment. And we grapple with that every day. So episode 10, we're gonna pick it up. And I always, mention, what feedback I get. And I keep repeating this one, reminding persons if you're new to Faith for the Journey, each episode builds from the last. And so, you can always jump in and kind of pick up or sense or feel where we are, with the episodes and what we're talking about. And again, this is a good time to say that I thank each and every one of you who listen to this podcast, who share this, you share the podcast and you provide feedback. Speaking of feedback, I did announce last week that I was to have a guest from the NBHI community, but the individual had to cancel, had another scheduled, had a conflict of scheduling, and so therefore had to cancel for today. And it was done in a timely fashion, and I really thank her for doing that. So we look forward to being able to talk with her next time. I don't know when that will be, but I will keep you posted on that. Um, Speaking of guests, then next week I'm going to have my best friend on. I think I mentioned him last time and at different times. And if you came to the book signing, you met him. His name is Terrence Dowdell. And it's interesting. You're going to hear about his healing journey and how flexible he has been and the resources that he's used to bring about his healing. So we're going to talk with Terrence Dowdell next week, Saturday at 6. And I'm really excited about the technology that I'm learning to use. Like I have did I tell you? Well, I'm recording. I have to remember that I'm recording, so I have to look up on the camera. I'm hoping that it's really recording. That I have. So let me just tell you some of the equipment that I have. Of course, I have a new microphone that's on my desk. I finally have a desk to put this thing on. I had a desk before, but I had like a smaller kind of postmodern kind of desk. But now this is like a real desk. And I love cactuses. If you've been in any of my offices, I have tons of those around. But this is a fake cactus, but it just represents so many things. So I have my cactus here. And I'm not going to lift this equipment, but I'm just going to kind of let you see it on my desk. This is a Pod Track P4. This is what I have used now in place of my soundboard. When I first started on Healing of the Heart, I had this, well, you couldn't see it, but it was like this archaic, it was my first time, podcasting. So it was brand new. I needed something that was very basic and that I could understand. And I have grown. And so now I'm using this Zoom PodTrack P4 that allows me to put a SD card, whatever SD means, and then I can record the podcast. In future podcast episodes, I can go back and play, segments of prior podcasts into, the existing or the current podcast that I'm doing. So I find that pretty cool. And so now I'm looking at the camera, and then I had the nerve to, because other persons have asked if I'm going to, record, and I said yes, because at some point I knew that I would do that. So I did. And I struggled with that last week, and I tried to record and it did not happen. So I'm hoping that, and then I struggled to put the mic on top of the camera. So I'm really learning a lot of new things, So I don't know. It's been a week, and of course, we always look to kind of recap just a bit, from what we're talking about in the last episode. So again, my name is Keisha Henry, and I am a licensed clinical psychotherapist, and I've been doing this for a little while. I hate to even mention how long I've been doing this. I feel like I hate to do it. I've said it a couple of times to other people, and I'm like, oh, it's been a while. It's been a while. It's funny how when you first get out of college, you have this picture in mind how your life is going to go. And I know I am not the only person that is saying, yeah, it really didn't go that way. In fact, it didn't go the direction that I had planned at all. Maybe for some of you, you're saying, yeah, my life has pretty much gone the way I wanted, except, right? So essentially, not one person can say that their life has gone in a straight line. Because by now we're realizing that, I was thinking the other day, hey, when I realized that I know myself, when did you start knowing yourself? 3 years old? 4 years old, 5 years old. Like, these pre-verbal years are critical times because, you start to come into your consciousness about who you are because you're starting to feel things. You can't make sense of everything, but you're starting to feel things. So, and then as we get older and we have more and more experiences, we realize then that, life does not go in a straight line. So where am I going with this? I don't know, really just kind of cementing the point about, loosen your grip. Loosen your grip is really important because, hey, if you look back from your pre-verbal years, early years, you recognize really quickly that things really don't go in a straight line and they don't go the way that you prefer. It's just existentialism at its best again. And a kind of reminder about what that word is. It simply means that things are going to happen in your life that you did not authorize. You just didn't. I mean, in your pre-verbal years, when you're 2 or 3 years old, things happen that you definitely did not authorize. You did not. And if you had a choice, you'd have authorized different parents, different relatives, different neighbors. I mean, you would authorize a lot of things differently in your life. And I give that example to say that's what existentialism is. It's those things outside of us that we don't really have control over. And then by the time we're adults, then and we have this consciousness. And here's the thing about this consciousness that I talk about. Some of the stuff is unconscious. A lot of it is. You know why? I'm going to go back because a lot of these things happen in your pre-verbal years when you're young, when the mind was young. You're very much not sophisticated or unsophisticated, and you weren't able to make sense of that stuff. And the funny thing, well, it's not funny. I see this every day in my work. I see this every day. I see it at times in my own life. By the way, that's why it's important that you have sound friends, friendships. People can actually be a mirror for you because you don't always see it. It's not conscious to you, it's unconscious. And so we're on default about a lot of things. And that's why it's important to have healthy people around us that can help to be a mirror for us so we can help to change and grow, so we don't fall into or get lost in existential things that happen to us and we just continue to go on thinking that these things are okay. So yeah, we gotta loosen our grip. Loosen our grip is paradoxical, right? So last episode we talked about the paradox of healing, doing the opposite of what is intuitive to you, to heal. And so we're going to continue with that. And I think it's important for me to kind of touch on that a little bit every time, just to kind of reinforce and just continue to provide reinforcements about, what this podcast is about. This podcast, again, is about, helping individuals to bring awareness to where they are in their lives, bring consciousness to that, recognizing where they are, and also then becoming curious about where they are, asking questions. Yeah, it's important to ask questions, not accepting everything, because remember, when we were younger, we just accepted everything and anything. Yeah, because we didn't know any better, right? Now, here's the thing about that. Not because we didn't know any better then, and now we're on default. Now that you're beginning to know yourself, now these are the times that you ask questions. You become curious about a lot of things. For some people, that's everything, and that's okay too. And then, begin to, find the possibilities so you can heal. And, let me just say again, we're all seekers. And in times in life, listen, there's just no simplified answer. Like, here's the thing. When I talk about simplified answers, listen to this. When I was growing up, and I grew up with a very conservative family, very religious, and there are things when I was affected with different things or bothered by, my mom would say stuff like, well, pray about it. That's a simplified answer. And you and I both know that just praying about it does not help. If I have a persistent headache, just pray about it. No, I might need to go to the doctor, actually, right? So yeah, we understand that, the use of religion and spirituality, that's important to our healing, but that's not the only aspects, or those are not the only elements that will help us to heal. So what I am saying here is that there is no simplified one answer, okay? There's no simplified one answer to how we heal and the journey that we take to heal. There isn't. So anyway, so that's what we're going to continue to talk about tonight. So loosen your grip then. I don't know. What does it sound like to you to loosen your grip? All right. Now, when I say that, and I say that sometimes, when I'm working, you know, someone said to me, so are you telling me to forget it? No, I'm not. I would never dare do that. How could you forget that? And the reason why persons say that to me sometimes because that's what they're accustomed to hearing. They're accustomed to hearing, well, forget about what happened to you. It's just move on. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not. What I am saying is Well, initially, there's a lot of things that I'm saying. What I'm saying is what happened to you, you'll never forget it. And the impacts of what happened to you, you'll never forget it. But at some point, you're going to have to loosen the grip off of it. And that's what I do every day. I help individuals, right? I literally have to help individuals pry off of their identity, the things that have happened to them and the consequences that have happened to them. Because what? Because then essentially they have become this thing. I've become that thing. I've become that. I've become that. And I've become that. And they see themselves through these existential things that happen to all of us. Suddenly we become to identify and over identify. These are social science words. We start to identify and over identify with the things that happen to us, and then suddenly we can't see any way out of it. Yeah, and so when I talk about loosening your grip, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and then too, I often, hear people say things like, well, if I forget about it, it means that then I have to forgive. No, 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 no. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm not saying. So I'm throwing out, um, after doing this work for a while, I understand how and why it is difficult to heal, because these are the what I call flawed thinking that come, right? They come as a result of the hurt and the trauma that we have sustained. That's what happens in the brain. It's like these negative feelings they get churned up after a while. And you know what happens? It just blocks us and we can't move forward. Not only does it block us, what it does, it spirals and it just continues to pick up similar things, similar themes, people, circumstances, and we just keep it moving. And before you know it, not only do we have existential things coming at us, but then we're also inflicting pain on ourselves and creating other hardships in our lives. Did you hear that? Yeah, so this is why it's important to recognize, the existential things that happen to us, because they are. Now, I use that word very heavily, and there's a reason why I do it. Why? Because a lot of people do not relate to the word sin. Oh, that's like a bad word today in this world. I don't want to talk about that. When I say, like, we live in a very fallen world, some people can relate to that. Some people are like, yeah, that's true. When I talk about adaptation, some people can relate to Darwinism, right? And evolution. Okay, I can work with that. But I start talking about, sin. Why? Because there's been a lot of religious contamination. People have been hurt a lot, by religion and, being highly controlled. I mean, you have terms nowadays called, spiritual bypass, meaning forget about it and create my own way of being. And hey, I'm not going to shake it, but my thing about that is, hey, I'm flexible about what and how we heal, but we also have to look at what is sustaining, what is lasting. And also, we don't want to do things that continues to perpetuate harm and hurt in our lives. So that's my only caution about that. So where am I going? I'm simply saying, let's go back. Let's take a look at what we are tightening our hands around. Tonight when I wrote about the what tonight's topic was about, I'd like to read it. So again, just to provide more reinforcement about if you're a listener joining us for the first time. So loosen your grip. It says suffering and adversity we cannot escape. Right. That's the existentialism. Right. We can't. We just can't. But how we suffer is a choice. We can lessen our suffering and in it learn lessons and find meaning from them despite the ugliness of it. And then let's just face it, right? It is ugly. So, now is a time where I always pause and I always kind of like look back and say, remember, being flexible in our healing requires us then, to shift our focus, right? How do we shift our focus? Again, that's going to be volitional. That word volitional, I like. Volitional means that it's a choice. It's so funny. I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, I like the word volitional. Like when I'm interviewing, new clients, because I'm trying to discern their motivation for doing this work in the first place. Because this is work, by the way, psychotherapy is work. And I tell people up front, like, when you come here, it's not just to sit here and spill your guts, because that's not work. That's just vomiting and you're getting something out and I feel good. And then You leave and nothing has changed. There's no work done. So psychotherapy is work. So when I talk about, the exception then, and focusing on, where do you put your focus? Where do you put your focus? Where do you put your focus? This is work, right? And so, I like this concept of, or the Hawthorne effect, that what you inspect, that's what you get. Where you put your focus, that's what you're going to continue to reap. So when we talk about loosening your grip and persons come to therapy, I always like to kind of interview to find out their motivation for therapy, their motivation for change. Volitional. So the volitional, it's a choice. So while you and I don't have the choice about, what happens to us, volitionally, we have the choice about how we relate to what happens to us. That is hard, okay? And when I'm working, I always say, hey, what I'm about to say to you is really going to be hard. It is. But I'll always give you, facts and evidence to support what I'm talking about. I keep forgetting I need to look at the camera. um, so volitional. So it's about how we choose to respond to the things that happen to us. You know, I asked someone this week, this is a question I asked. I asked this question about destiny or fate, and I've been asking this question for a while, actually. August coming up will be 17 or 18 years I've been doing this work. And I said, well, what word do you connect with, destiny or fate? And people always look at me like I have four heads. Oh, I've never been asked that. Well, okay, but I'm asking. And if you can't answer that today, then maybe next time when we meet. And I always give it for an assignment to kind of like look up these two words. Just like when a couple of weeks ago, I said, look up the difference between meaning and an answer. There's a slight difference. There is. And I'm always tempted to give away the answer, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Look it up. So destiny or fate. So the person finally, was able to look, and I'm asking you, destiny or fate, what word do you connect with? In either case, right, you may have a different orientation to the word, but the outcome is basically it is one that you cannot choose. You don't have an option about it. You just don't. In either case, fate or destiny, there's something bigger at work that operates. Now, go back to the prior 2 or 3 podcasts to get more, grounding in that. Don't want to spend too much time on that. I want to focus on loosening your grip. So stay connected with me, right? So if part of this is where we don't have control, then there has to be a balance. There's a part of this then that you have control too. It's not all or nothing. And that's another concept, right? It's a flawed concept that it's not all or nothing. So fate and destiny, either one, whichever you connect with, has a part, but you and I also have a part. There has to be a balance of power here. There is. But a lot of times in life, things come so hard and so furious, it knocks us off our feet. And if we don't have this understanding about how to loosen our grip, we're going to be floored right over. Just run right over. Hey, how many times in your life have you been run over? I mean, I've had quite a few. Just floored. Just floored. And oftentimes, the reason why we're floored is because of what we're tied to, what we're connected to. Why? Because as I start out this podcast talking about, we're all connected. We all have this. We have this inner kernel of a desire to be something great. To have goodness. Yeah, it's in us. Yes, the human spirit has. If there's something in us that, by the time, if you're a girl, because I'm a girl, by the time you're like 9 or 10, did you guys play house growing up? Did you try to, I don't know, comb your doll's hair and try to be a mom or try to be a wife? Okay. I used to try to wash clothes. In Jamaica, we used to wash clothes outside. And I used to, pretend, because I used to watch my grandmother cook in the outside kitchen. So I used to pretend, put my apron on. And hey, those are symbolic play. That's what the social science word is symbolic play. You imitate what you've been socialized to do. So as you're growing up, you're learning, things are, developing inside of you, what you want for yourself, the kind of life you want, or the kind of life you don't want, right? So there's certain things that's happening on the inside, and you begin to, from early on, we begin to tighten the grip. We begin to tighten the grip very early. This is what I want, or this is what I don't want. But remember, fate or destiny, right, has a big role. Existentialism has a big role in what happens to us. So, we start to tighten the grip early. I'm telling you, it's profound, right? And then as we get older, and remember, things are happening to us that we didn't authorize. So it's already altering. Pay attention. Existential is already altering. It's already challenging this grip that we started developing. And then as we get older, more and more things come. By the way, between ages 10 and 11, no, between the ages 5 and 7, our belief system is formed. That's science, that's neuroscience, right? Belief about death, belief about, values and traditions about maybe marriage, kids. I mean, yeah. And the thing about that is it's being formed much earlier on the inside. And so by the time we come out and we start seeing certain things around us, we that grip is starting to form about what it is that we want to have for ourselves. And then again, like I'm repeating, to be intentional, and then existential things happen to us, maybe traumas, disruptions, interruptions in our lives, that starts to challenge, right, that grip that we have. And so as we get older, right, maybe that picture you had in mind just seems to be more and more distant and you're not able to secure that. Maybe you start comparing yourself to other people about what they have and you want that for yourself and you become so disillusioned and you become hopeless. Now's a good time for me to pause because when I come back then, I want to talk about concepts about, number one, I want to talk about exceptions. What has been the exception to your existentialism this past week? And then I also want to talk about a concept called, post-traumatic growth. What happens to us after, we've been challenged so much by the grip that we've had. I want to talk about those two things or three. So I think that was a good time to pause. And I'm going to play some music. I told myself I wasn't going to do a long podcast tonight, and I always end up doing that. I just can't help myself. And I like this song, Meet Me Here, by, I played it last week, and I like it. So here we go. Ever found it hard to bounce back from a situation? Mm? Or maybe some things have happened in your life, and you're like, you know, I don't know, what do you have your grip around? All of us have our, well, I wouldn't say all, that's not a good qualifier. Most of us have our grip around our families. We have our grip around our health. We have grip around, our education. Hey, we have a grip around, how, we want things to go on a particular project or something like that. I mean, we have our grip around many things. And not just now, but even from before, you've had grip, grip on a lot of things. You have a grip on about your life, and things just didn't go the way that you hoped. And some people are able to bounce back, and that's being resilient. I like the word resiliency, and in our work, in our social science world, we use that word quite a lot because it makes sense. And the doctor that came up with that, I forgot his name now, but he's a psychologist. Yes, he's a psychologist. Yes, and he coined the phrase post traumatic growth, which it makes sense. But so post traumatic growth is different from resiliency, and I'll get into that towards the end. But I raised a question because life is filled with a lot of traumas from the very beginning, middle, and as I said before, that's not going to stop. But I just want to kind of break the segment and by asking this, have you been through something that you bounce back from? Yeah, and then the second part of that question is, have you been, have you experienced something that you just felt like you can't come back from this? Like there's something in you, like the bottom just fell out. I've had a couple of experiences like that. One of them, I was reminded, my grandmother's passing. It was the first death in our family. I had just started graduate school in 2003. Yep. And, that's been coming up for me recently. Even today, I thought about her. That was hard. That was hard. I'm tiny, and I went down to skin and bones. My husband, oh my goodness, like my kids were little, and I remember my son James. He was 4 or 5. No, I can't recall how young he was. Maybe 3 or 4. But it was one of those moments. And first of all, we never had a death in the family. Well, not on my mother's side, and she's a matriarch. So when that happened, it was devastating. Like it was like seriously devastating. I feel it even now, which makes me touch on grief a little bit to say that you're never not gonna have grief in your life. It's just that over a period of time, you're not as activated to grief. You don't react as much. However, let me qualify if you've gone through the healing process of grief, because grief is something that is a part of life. Nobody likes to say that, but it's true. That's another existentialism that fact, we're every day we live, we're dying. I mean, nobody likes to say that either. But every day, I mean, the Bible says that we go around dying every day in our body. We're aging every day. That's existentialism, fate or destiny. We don't have a choice about that. But what we do have a choice about is, how we write our stories every day. Man, I've been really saying, so that's my exception. So my exception now is this, right? So instead of focusing, and I've had a lot of things happen and go wrong, this week, last week. I mean, just pause and stop. If you were to sit here and just write about the things that go wrong from day to day, week to week, we could fill up a book. hmm and the more we focus on that is where we're tightening our grip. And from some of these situations, we feel, some of us, but most of us are resilient. We can bounce back from some of these things. But I don't know, maybe you're listening to this podcast and you've had some things happen to you week after week that you just feel like you're being pounded and you just cannot bounce back. And I'm here to tell you that you can. You really can. Post-traumatic growth is possible. What's the difference, you say? Well, post-traumatic growth is the growth that happens after the trauma has happened. I can't tell you how many persons I've worked with that have gone through significant trauma. They did. Now, here's the thing. They don't go back to previous levels of functioning. That's how we call it. In other words, how you were before it happened. We call that previous levels of functioning. The science shows that most people never return to that. Like after you lost your mother or father, or after you've been beaten, you were in a shelter, or you were sexually assaulted or physically assaulted. Some people never go back to who they were. That is a fact, okay? And in this work that I do, I help persons to grieve that. Man, grief is a very, 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 very important process. Yeah, grief is part of existentialism. I just find the need to probably do more on that. Yeah, I might do that. It's an existential, I mean, it's just tough, you know? But the post traumatic growth is this, right? And I'm going to tie this in now to and include scripture. I'm including science, I'm including scripture. And I'm going to tie it under the umbrella of being flexible in our growth, right? Being flexible in our resources to continue to grow. Why? Because we're talking about loosening our grip. I gave examples about, perhaps when we started tightening our grip. I gave examples about, how at times, because of life, that, we have this tightening around the things that didn't happen. Or we have tightening around, these precious parts of our lives, loved ones, right? I mentioned that careers, achievements, right? But remember, fate or destiny, existentially, everything that I just talked about, every item I just listed is impermanent and it will not be here. So then, what is post-traumatic growth? Man, so post-traumatic growth says this, right? So we talked about resiliency being part of being able to bounce back. Being able to bounce back after whatever we were tightening our grip around, we're able to say, all right, that thing didn't happen, I can let that go. It's easier. But there's some things that we have a hard time loosening our grip around. And those things that we have a hard time loosening our grip around are the things that we just feel like we can't come back from. It's like we can't come back. And this is I want to introduce to you now the post-traumatic growth and how we can. And I also want to say here that remember, we're all seekers in this life. Why? because there's hardship and hurt and pain. We're all looking for answers. And did I tell you in all the other episodes, we will not get answers to everything in this life? Did I tell you that? And yeah, there's no oversimplified way to answer to the traumatic things that happen to us. Man, if you try doing that, you're like hitting your head against a wall like all the time. You're living in a fog. Did you listen to the last episode, Paradox of Healing? I feel like I just need to say that again. Go listen to that one. You know, somebody told me that the podcast they're like mini sessions. I'm glad. I'm really glad for that. You know, yeah, I'm really glad for that. All right. So what's post traumatic growth? It's after you've been hit so hard throughout your lifetime. And I'm gonna tell you something. For some of us, it only takes one event to make it hard to come back from. Only one. Only one. You just have no motivation. You have severe clinical depression. You decide to not work. You start doing all kinds of things. So, PTG, what it says then, is being able to find meaning and grow beyond the point that you were before. Let me say it again. It's being able to find meaning, not answers. You're not always going to find answers. But it's being able to find meaning, being able to develop a new set of beliefs. Seriously, really going to the deeper level and finding out the newer version of yourselves. The other philosophies call that enlightenment, you know, but it's really finding that other part. And you know what? To get to that part of ourselves, it's not pretty. It's hard, guys. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. And I'm going to tell you too. I always teach this, and I'm going to repeat it all the time. We go through different stages of development, and at every stage of development, we have different set of needs. That in and of itself can be difficult. And how do we pick up from there and continue? Because we're always going to be challenged, and perhaps the skills from the last set of development, you probably need to tweak that. And that's what happens when we have difficulties in our lives. So post-traumatic growth then looks at a new set of growth, a newer version of the self, that it's never what you were accustomed to or that you were used to. It's newness. It's something new. It's something different. And we have a choice about working towards that if we can understand the impermanence of life, the impermanence of the situations that happen to us. It's going to require some things to get to this, though. It's going to require your volition. It's going to require that you choose. You choose to work through the pain, to embrace it. So that's the paradox, right? Instead of fighting the pain, instead of looking for answers all the time, maybe switch to look for meaning. Instead of looking for answers, paradoxically, look for meaning. Instead of fighting, how about embracing it and forbearing it? Instead of looking for, having something immediate, how about being patient? And again, and here's a common one that comes up: acceptance. For me, first, like I've been working with this all this week with all my clients. It's like working on acceptance. It's hard. That's also a choice. Again, and when I get to explore what acceptance means, a lot of times people, when we talk about acceptance, they have a whole different set of mental images coming through that are not accurate. So I'm going to say too that, find yourself a competent, therapist, psychologist, someone to work with you, on developing your spirituality, because spirituality leads to better mental, emotional, psychological health. When you address the painful things that happen in your life, the things that we have a grip around, you are becoming enlightened. And that is part of being spiritual. When you have better understanding about yourself and life and how you relate, that is being spiritual. Now, as we close, the exception for me this week, I was taking a walk yesterday and I happened to just look up. Matter of fact, after I leave this podcast this evening, I'm going to go take a walk. So remember now, being flexible in our resources on the healing journey, remembering that we're all seekers, right? So being flexible, meaning that, what else? Now, this requires you to pay attention to what your needs are and what helps you. And so one of the ways, one of the elements or one of the strategies that people or even science recommends is going outside in nature. So yesterday I went outside in nature and I happened to look up in the tree, and you know what I saw? A cardinal. Very just boss like. And the tree was not a cluster tree, it was in an open tree. Very, very, I don't know, elegant tree. And the cardinal was just sitting there. And I said, Lord, wow, that was from me. Just sat there and I took up my phone and I took a picture of the cardinal. And cardinals have spiritual meaning. And it was very timely for me, so that was the exception. That right there reminded me to take my mind off of whatever was bothering me or the things that concerned me during the week and look at the exception. So sometimes the exception is in nature. It's wherever we put ourselves other than on the focus of the negative dominant themes and occurrences that happen in our lives. That's another way of being flexible. That will also point us to being patient. That will point us to acceptance, awareness, curiosity, right? These are all important elements on the road to healing, on the road to developing faith so you can heal, so you can respond differently to things that come to us. So I have a question for you before we close tonight. So we talk about loosening your grip. I want you to reflect on the things that you treasure. So here's the question. I want you to reflect on the things that you treasure and the things that you desire, right? That's the first thing I want you to do. And I want you to consider what might be lulling you or keeping you away from living your best life in the now, right? So pay attention to what you're tightening your hands around. Some people feel like if this didn't happen, I can live a better life. Or when this happens, I'm going to live a better life. So I want you to reflect on the things that you're tightening your hands. What do you treasure, the things that you desire that might be keeping you just like what we call checked out of life, keeps you hopeless and not cultivating faith? I want you to think about that. I want you to remember that question. And then I'm going to repeat it again in the next podcast. And remember, next week, Saturday, we're going to have a guest on, Terrence Dowdell. And we're going to be talking about his healing journey and the flexibilities that he's had to, adapt to and make practice. And you'll hear about his story. I'm going to close with a poem from my book, Healing of the Heart. I keep forgetting that I'm recording, video recording. I'm going to hold it up to the camera. It's called The Unknown because the existential is the unknown, okay? It's on page 29 in my book, Healing of the Heart. It says, creating the unknown. So remember, let's just tie this back in, looping it around to fate or destiny. Remember, so that has its own power, but remember too that we also have an engagement. We have an engagement. We have an engagement with destiny or fate. We have an engagement. Okay. Creating the unknown. Creating the unknown takes courage. I have to be bold. Often I limit myself by what I already know. Pause. So we already know trauma. We already know all the things that went wrong. We figured it out by now. Let's keep going. Next stanza. I don't know sometimes, most times, where I'm going. I just know that I have to keep rowing. Yes. That's the faith part. The tides of life, existential, right? The tides of life seemingly insurmountably high. The signs are not always clear. No, they're not. That's the existential part about life too. My emotions are everywhere, reeling with fear underneath. There's something I want and feel very strongly about, but there are moments when I'm filled with doubt. My heart pounds. Questions fall like rain. We have lots of questions, don't we? Very few answers. Questions fall like rain, not like a thunderstorm. No, no, no. The one that goes on and on and on. Then I realized there's a purpose in the storm. Water, a refilling of the seas and estuaries. This is the part I like about this poem. See, this is the part that, the paradox of healing. So water and a refilling of the seas and estuaries, flowing to unknown places and sanctuaries, satisfying yet disrupting collective stasis. You know how we're stuck? Yeah. Opportunities, moments, straight paths, unexpected detours, unknown, known before, existentially, reminded I am still the author though. I have an engagement, right? Yeah. Reminded I am still the author, like a lightning bolt quickening to action, awakening my fretful stupor. From pasture to pasture, destiny may have a part or take a certain posture, but a bystander I cannot and will not be. An open landscape is there to seize from me. A plain canvas screams, create unknowns unique to me. That's the unknown. And I don't remember when I wrote this poem, but again, it's in my book, Healing of the Heart Lessons from My Journey. You can find this book on Amazon. Listen, I thank you so much for joining me for episode 10, Loosening Your Grip. It was very fulfilling for me to do this podcast because, as I was talking to you, some of my own, stories, came to mind and came to heart. And I shared one or two of them. And I do that because I want to make sure that I'm relatable and that you can feel the authenticity coming through in this podcast. Because, hey, the purpose of this podcast is to restore hope, create hope, continue hope. And so I thank you for joining me. And I want to play this song as we end the podcast. We're ending almost on time, almost at 7. It's called Free Indeed. You're free indeed. You are.